He's British trained. He is a professor in various universities, including the Institute of Leadership and Communication Studies in Rabat. He's on the speaking circuit, and he's also my very dear friend. Let's welcome Dr. Mohamed Chtatou.
Do we have until 5 o'clock?
5 o'clock. We have to.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be with you here this afternoon for this session with very distinguished speakers here to talk about media and national security, which I think is an extremely important topic. I'll take a few minutes, first of all, just talk about that during the Third Reich, Hitler chose Goebbels to be his Minister of Propaganda and Media. That's number one point, to show the importance of media and how sometimes it can be extremely dangerous, insidious, as it were. Second point, the Arab Spring, or the Arab uprisings, as you want to call them, occurred because people were able to have citizen media, what I call citizen media. They were able to have computers, to have telephones, and to communicate with each other. Bearing in mind that in the Arab world, the Ministry of Information, as it was called, was always extremely important in all the regimes that we had in the Arab world. So if the Arab Spring happened, it's thanks to Twitter, thanks to the Facebook, and thanks to the social media. People were able to communicate without having the secret police tracking them or following them. They were able to give information. They were able to reach out to the international television networks and to the newspapers. I remember when I was at the university studying political science, I had a French lecturer or French professor called Palazzoli. Those of you who were at the university in Rabat will remember him. He said once that media is power. If you have no media, you had no power. This is true in traditional societies when media was in the hands of the regimes. And there were times where Ministry of Interior was also Ministry of Information. So media is extremely important. Today, something happened last year in Morocco. The regulator of the telecom in Morocco stopped access to Skype and to WhatsApp, the telephone and video version, not the texting. A lot of people didn't know why. Even today, they don't know why. The reason is very simple, because the Salafists, or the religious extremists, were using it to communicate with their own people, to communicate and imperil the security, national security. If you are going through the internet and looking at the ISIS today, you'll find they have so many websites where they are inseminating, trickling down information about their religious ideology. And it is a danger to many countries. So today we are going to deal with media and national security. How can we secure national security without imperiling media, without stopping media doing its work? So we have a number of distinguished people here in this panel, and we'll try to have 5 minutes to each one of you gentlemen, because we don't have time. So I would like to start with the Right Honorable Congressman Albert Wynn, former member of the U.S. House of Representatives. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation to participate. Good afternoon to everyone. Can you hear me better now? Is it off? Let me try to, okay, how's that? No? Testing? Yeah, it's on now. Great. Okay, let me start again. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to participate from a different perspective. I am not obviously a journalist, nor do I have any claim to being a national security expert. I'm a former member of Congress. I represented the 4th District of Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C. I sat on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And so my perspective is that of a government official, an elected government official, trying to navigate the new world of telecommunications and mass media and understand its implications for public policy, public safety, national security. Let me say it at the onset, I've had the opportunity to visit Morocco many years ago when I was still in Congress. I went to Rabat and also to Fez, and it's a beautiful country. I had a wonderful experience. And so I'm looking forward to talking to you today briefly and share some of my observations. You've had conversations already about the new media, the changing face of media. You've also had conversations about democracy and civil rights. My observation, and it's an overarching observation, is that there's an inherent tension between media freedom and national security. In this country, as you well know, we consider the First Amendment, freedom of the press, to be sacrosanct. We then say to the rest of the world, this is our model, this is the example we would like you to follow. That freedom of the press is sacrosanct. Nonetheless, even in this country, we have tensions. There are concerns on the national security front that some media exposure is harmful to national security from the standpoint of exposing pictures and propaganda that would encourage terrorists, that would encourage radicalization. And some people say, well, it's the media's fault because they're making this available. Information on bomb-making materials, again, available through new media. And that sentiment, that tension comes to the forefront that, well, should there be some greater restraints on this? Some of the disclosures through WikiLeaks and other sources, some of the hacking, all goes back to this question, how do we coexist with the free media on the one hand and our commitment to national security on the other? I'm not going to suggest I have the answer, but I do want to share with you some of my thoughts. Where there are concerns about the impact of media and radicalization and promoting terrorism, if you will, there are also counterbalancing forces that help us counter terrorism, also provided by free media. And that's what also needs to be part of this equation. One of the most important things is the positive messaging that occurs as a result of the free media presence. The most recent example occurred with the stabbing in Minnesota, and there was obviously a great concern. Yet another terrorist incident in the United States, and here's the media showing all the chaos and the concern. Something else the media showed, though, that was very positive. That was the Somali community coming forward in a press conference to talk about their commitment to the United States, to working with law enforcement, and their opposition to radical terrorists. That was very constructive, that was very helpful. So the virtue of a free media is you can have positive, proactive messaging that might otherwise be compromised if the media were inhibited. Other examples, apprehension. Every single terrorist that has been apprehended in this country was done so with the help of the media. The media publicized descriptions, publicized information. People communicated via the media about the circumstances, what they saw. All of that was very helpful, leading to apprehension. So again, in a free media society, you have these inherent advantages that you would not have if the media were inhibited. Probably one of the best examples, and I like to focus on the need for proactive approaches to the media, and that is the See Something, Say Something campaign. That has had a dramatic effect here in this country in terms of educating people about the threat that does exist, the very real threat that exists, and how you can respond to it by connecting the citizen to law enforcement. And that would not have happened without the cooperation of the media. So whereas I see the tension, and I hear people say, well, we somehow need to restrict what goes on in the media or media access, I think that's not the right approach. If you're concerned about leaks, and they're legitimate concerned about leaks, then the penalty and the restraint should be not on the media, but on the leaker, on the person who illegally utilizes the information, not on the people who disperse the information. That's something we can do without impinging upon the media's rights. So I think what I would say is this is not something that's amenable to an easy or quick solution. It's something that's going to be with us for a number of years. We continue to hold the First Amendment and free press sacrosanct, and so we're going to, here in this country as well as abroad, promote the concept of free media access, and also work with the media in areas such as See Something, Say Something, where it can be helpful. So I'll conclude with those observations and be happy to take questions as we go forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for very insightful remarks. Thank you. The question that many people ask, would open media be a jeopardy for national security today? And I would like to introduce my next speaker, the distinguished Christopher Harvin, founding partner of Sanitas International. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. My name again is Christopher Harvin. I'm a founding partner at Sanitas International. Thank you, Congressman, for those great remarks. I'm going to build on some of what he said. Some of my perspective is based on being a PR practitioner and helping our clients around the world to promote themselves, to attract investment, to overcome reputational challenges. I've been fortunate enough to work with a congressman in a number of ways, particularly providing, and this is an example of what we do, is providing media that changes the landscape or educates key stakeholders in Washington that allows the congressman and some of his colleagues to go in and then lobby Congress in a successful manner. My perspective of this is deeply rooted both in being a PR practitioner, supporting clients like that, but I was a former White House official and in the Secretary of Defense's office and happened to be there in 9/11. So a lot of my perspective on 9/11 changed my perspective of the media because there's such a careful balance between national security and the media. As the Congressman mentioned, the media is the only profession really singled out by the Constitution in the First Amendment, which is a very powerful thing that the sanctity of that profession is regarded in such a high standard among the founders of this country. But it can become very dangerous in the aspect of if you see how ISIS has been using the media or digital media to recruit terrorists. Well, how does someone like the U.S. Put restraints on that in some form if foreign actors are acting in a manner towards our government using the media in that perspective? Well, it's a debate that has come on in this building numbers of times as a member here. And it's kind of ironic that we're having this conversation in the press club because this is a very dear topic to them. But the aspect of, if you look at in the Vietnam era, the war papers, or you look at 9/11 and how the media, first it was the towers and then it was the Pentagon. Well, people were running down the street in Washington, thinking the plane was coming again for the Pentagon or it was coming for the White House or the Capitol. All of that was really pushed by the media. So the media, and this is something that they struggle with sometimes, is how much do you report and break a story? And how much do you hold that story and source it with 2 to 3 sources? And so a lot of editors at the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they're going to get this breaking news on the Twitter feeds and the investigative media that says this is happening, But mainstream media is not going to write about it until there's a second source, or there's proof, or there's contact. Even with all the propaganda that ISIS is pushing, or Russian propaganda, or there are a lot of different, even you're seeing things in, and it's not just terrorism that we think about. It's things that are happening here in Ferguson, in Charlotte. You know, media pushes this out, and people in the streets before truths are known or non-truths that there's people being killed and arrested. So the media is a very, very powerful thing. And I think we see that a lot from a national security standpoint when we do embeds. I was fortunate enough to run embeds in Iraq and Afghanistan with the Defense Department, and was there for 14 months. When can we put out operational information? You know, how do we use the media to confirm, you know, the Uday and Qusay kills in Iraq and Mosul? Or how do we talk about, you know, boarding of tankers that are being hijacked by the black market in Iran? There are a lot of various aspects of the media that have a national security aspect that we can discuss and go on for days. But I think when it deals with Morocco, I think we have to look at the impact of social media, the impact of mobile, on the speed at which news is breaking, on the ways that terrorism is recruiting members. You know, there are thousands of, I think there's 1,000 to 2,000 members that are of ISIS that have been recruited from Morocco. You know, so how does the government both protect their borders, protect their people, utilizing the media or understanding the technology around the media? There's certain strategies and tactics. But how does the government of Morocco actually promote themselves and build their brand through the use of media or content that's pushed online to actually attract investment, or to build the reputation to ensure that their people continue to get open travel around the world to do trade and to do travel? So I think this is, you know, we could go on for days about that, but that's a brief perspective of the different ways that media have an impact on the brand of the national security of Morocco and the United States.
Thank you very much, sir. What actually we need in Morocco is, with the United States, is more exchanges on the level of media in terms of learning from experience of American people, the freedom of media, obviously, and lots of things, a capacity building mostly. But I think we've got to do a lot on that particular area. We'll come back to that later on, yeah. My next speaker is distinguished gentleman Charles Kestenbaum, president of BNK International. I have a question for you, sir. Christopher talked about embedding the press. And if you remember, during this second war against Saddam Hussein, most of the press was embedded. Was it for the reasons of national security, or for some other reasons that we don't know? You know, so that is my question for you, and obviously we can talk about other things as well.
All right, thank you. Well, who am I? Why am I here? Can you all see this? No, all right, well, come up and see. I'll show you later. Okay, that's me at my Moroccan handicraft boutique in New Jersey in 1972. Very nice job. Now, we live in a very complicated and interconnected world, the world of Marshall McLuhan, the global village, not necessarily Hillary's global village, but the Marshall McLuhan global village. 20,000 security cameras in London, in New York, everywhere. In Washington. We were talking about how the total surveillance is working very effectively now. The Boston Marathon bombers were caught by video cameras that were in town. The New York and New Jersey bomber was caught and brought to justice within 24 hours by a whole network of video cameras that were then, and an owner of a bar saw a picture of the guy on TV and saw him on his steps the next morning sleeping and called the police and they arrested him. In fact, every terrorist has been caught now by social media, through videos and cameras and networking. Social media is very important for us to understand. What we call cascade analysis. In the Arab Spring in Egypt in 2011, we did some analysis and found there were 12 people who, in this cascade of social media, of one person tweeting 10 or accessing 10, who then accessed 10, and one became 100 and became 1,000 within a matter of minutes. If the Egyptian government had found these 12 people and shut them down, the whole Egyptian situation would have been dramatically different, because very few of the people would have had access to the information and gotten out in the street in an organized and coherent manner. So it's very important. They could have literally crippled the whole thing. Social media today, again, do you know that the Saudi government has just now announced that anyone who wants to own a cell phone in Saudi Arabia in future must register their fingerprints and their biometrics, DNA and fingerprints, with the Saudi government. That's pretty amazing stuff, to think that they're so worried about social media and everyone with texting and cell phones and access to the social media, that they want to be able to identify everybody in ways that we haven't even thought of before, okay? So cybersecurity is a huge issue. If you haven't been hacked, it's only because you don't realize you haven't been hacked. Truly. Hands. Has there anyone who has not been hacked on their phone or their computer or in their office or somewhere in the past? Look, Aramco's computers were shut down by the Iranian government, right? Entire database of 25 million employees of the federal U.S. government was hacked through the Office of Personnel Management. Millions of credit cards at Target were hacked. The Democratic National Committee was hacked, right? 500 million Yahoo accounts were discovered to have been hacked. Okay, so the idea is, if you haven't been hacked, you simply aren't aware of it yet. Now, cybercrime is conducted in many different ways. There's traditional espionage. There's government to government. So a government tries to access another government. There's governments to civilians, where a government tries to access into a civilian database or information or source. There's hybrids. There's where the Chinese government, for example, the Chinese Navy owns a company called Huawei. Huawei and the Chinese government hacked into Lucent, stole their 5ESS technology, remanufactured it, and by the way, is there a Lucent today? No. Lucent is gone, okay? Huawei is the second largest telecommunications company in the world. So cyber is important, cyber hacking is really critical, and the message to us is that it's not going away. The internet of everything is coming. Everything is becoming more connected and more connected. In fact, half of you are looking at your cell phones right now. All right? So I could go on and on. I know there's time factor, so just to keep in mind that, what do we do about it? Well, first issue is we have to educate ourselves. We should know what's going on. The entire knowledge of humankind is available on your cell phone. You don't believe it? Ask Siri. Siri? Yeah, it's there, okay? So the thing is, algorithms, megadata, digital codes, nanotechnology, additive manufacturing, artificial intelligence, how are we keeping up with all of this in the social network and communications process, okay? It's really important. So the first thing is, we need to be educated. We shouldn't have to learn about what's going on in our own government from Edward Snowden, right? That's more social media, more access. So I will leave the subject there, except that, it's really important. We can't live without it. We can't live with it. And it's going to have a growing impact on our lives as we go forward, including for our friends in Morocco.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned Saudi Arabia and taking the biometrics of people who use telephones. There is a fear in the Arab world today, mostly in the Gulf states, that the next Arab Spring will take place in the Gulf states. As the prices of oil are coming down, and there is an ease within the society that has been, in many ways, a rentier society, and governments gave money to the people to keep the peace, the social peace. Now things are changing fast. So things are going to happen and imperil the states of the Middle East because of the media. Now, my next speaker is David Pollock, Kaufman Fellow of the Washington Institute. And I would like to ask you, sir, how do you see the future of media in Morocco? If you have a Sophie, an idea about that, because in one hand you had the state, that tries to control the media in many ways. On the other hand, there is what I call the millennials in Morocco. The millennials in Morocco are a breed of people who want freedom because they can use now the telephones and express themselves. And actually, in many ways, most of the opposition that we find today in Morocco is in the media. So if you can please talk a little bit about that. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the invitation and all of the distinguished colleagues on the panel and the moderator. The future, of course, if we learned anything from the Middle East in the last 5 years, is that the future is almost impossible to predict. I want to be very cautious in responding to your direct question about the future of the media in Morocco, but I will say that it seems to me that Morocco has actually had a relatively free press for a very long time, and in contrast to most of the other countries in the region. And I can tell a personal quick anecdote from my first extended visit to Morocco, which is way back in 1981. I've been there many, many times since, most recently just a few months ago, for the Moroccan Security Forum conference in Marrakesh. At that time, I thought, since I speak Arabic and read Arabic, I thought it would, and people were kind of bothering me on the street, trying to be tourist guides, and you know how it is sometimes. And I thought maybe I would try to fit in. I would try somehow to look like a native, which was a stupid idea in the first place. And I thought maybe I would do that by carrying around a local newspaper under my arm, in Arabic, but showing it so it was very visible, so people would think maybe I was an Arab. And what I didn't know is that the newspaper I chose at random was El Bayan, which was the Communist Party newspaper. Some of you may remember that, with a big red masthead showing that. And so I was walking around the street with the Communist Party paper under my arm, and people were staring at me and following me, and I was thinking, boy, I must have done something terribly wrong. I didn't know what it was. I found out later. But that was, and so I threw the paper away and stopped trying to fit in. But the point I'm trying to make here is that even back then, even before the liberalizations and the reforms and the ascension of King Mohamed VI and so on, even back then there was a relatively diverse media scene in Morocco. And I think that is likely to continue, all the more so because, as many of you have already said, the mainstream press, whether it's broadcast or print, is no longer a monopoly of anybody, not the government, not the broadcasters, not the mega media companies, because almost anyone with a cell phone or a smartphone or a computer at home can become his or her own media person, and create a blog, a website, a social media network with many, many thousands of people. And that's on top of the challenge from international broadcasters, satellite broadcasters, that was started in the Arab context by Al Jazeera back in the mid-1990s and now has proliferated, so that people have a really wide open choice of media sources. Now, from the standpoint of a free press, which, as the Congressman pointed out, is one of the most cherished American values of all, this is a good thing. But I have to say that it has, as my colleague here pointed out, its dark side. It's not just that you can be hacked more easily, but it's also that people are having, I think, actually a harder time than ever figuring out what information is real and what isn't. And there are so many different websites with all their different angles and biases And there are so many different broadcasters and so many different social media networks that it's pretty easy to fall victim to scams, to rumors, to deliberate disinformation campaigns, to conspiracy theories, which are very prevalent in that part of the world, as unfortunately they sometimes are here too. And so what we have is lots and lots of information, which I think is only going to expand in the future, despite what may be government attempts to limit it. And at the same time, greater and greater difficulty in filtering out truth from falsehood, and rumor from fact, and conspiracy theories from reasonable debate. And that applies to the particular focus of our discussion right now, which is national security and the terrorist threat and the use of all these different media outlets by extremists of all different kinds, and how to counteract that. And I want to say just a few quick words about that. Governments are not going to be able, I think, at least most governments, to fully control that, no matter what they do, no matter how many filters they try to apply, or how many servers they try to control, or how many biometric data sets they try to acquire from their citizens. There are workarounds, and I know this from my own experience, that ordinary people can use, even in Syria today, right? Even in the middle of a civil war and one of the most brutal, repressive governments that you could ever find anywhere on earth, people have ways of communicating with each other, pretty privately, of communicating with me, you know, pretty privately. And I think that's true in Iran. Again, it's something I know from my own work, and I think it's probably true, although I know much less about it, in China or Russia or other places where the governments are trying to kind of monopolize this vast and diverse media scene. So countering extremism and other forms of propaganda and falsehood and incitement on the media, especially social media, is not going to be something that governments will probably, I think, be able to do. What about the media carriers? Can Facebook and Twitter and other such important vehicles, can they shut down terrorist sites? They're trying to do that, but again, in my judgment, they're only going to be partially successful at best. I've talked to a number of these people in some depth in the last few months, and you know, they're very good at what they do. They're developing algorithms, for example, that will automatically delete beheadings from Instagram or Facebook or other social media, and that's helpful. But again, there are workarounds that extremists and terrorists can always find to get their message across. And some of these companies are actually trying to institute, and I don't know if, I don't think this has actually been applied on a large scale. This is experimental so far. They're trying to come up with ways that will automatically produce counter messages, so that, if, for example, if you go on some search engine and you put in, how do I join ISIS, that, which, you know, you can do, right? People are free to do that anywhere in the world. That the server will automatically send you a counter message about what's wrong with the Islamic State, why it's not a good idea, why it's not even an Islamic idea to, but again, my guess is that this is probably not going to be very effective, because people will always find, will be able to switch it off and turn to some other network or some other vehicle and avoid the counter messages if that's what they want to do. So what are we left with? I think what we're left with is, and I know this is a little bit self-serving, but it's like an advertisement for my own work. What we're left with is civil society and NGOs and private efforts, independent efforts to not to stamp out the extremist messages, but to promote other messages, peaceful dialogue, better understanding, cross-cultural communication, especially in different languages, but across cultures and religions and political affiliations. And that's one of the things that I try to do at the Washington Institute with a bilingual Arabic-English blog that I run. It's called Fikra Forum, and which the name itself, of course, is a combination of Arabic and English. Fikra meaning idea, and forum is a forum, muntada in Arabic. And what it is, it is literally an online platform, a forum, for people from the Middle East, including, of course, Morocco and any other country there, to exchange views about even the most controversial, even taboo kinds of issues with other people in the region, with Americans, with Europeans, and anyone else who wants to have a reasonable dialogue about issues like this. Any sort of issue, really, social, political, economic. And we have found in the last few years, this is a relatively new platform, but we have found that it seems to be having some effect. People are increasingly, spontaneously coming to us and asking to be part of this online community and to publish their views. And I really would welcome all of you and all of your contacts in Morocco and here in the United States as readers of Fikra Forum and as contributors to it. Because in my view, this approach to the issue of media and national security is the one most likely to succeed in the long run. And I will leave you with that, and I hope to see you online at Fikra Forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your informative and incisive remarks. Now we have approximately 9 minutes. We'll turn to the audience to take some questions.
Hello. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you folks in this forum. The first question that I have is that a lot of negativity about social media. I know it has a lot of positivity too. I understand that social media can have effects overseas, but also effects in our home. It's what happened with the police brutality, for instance, and how now people are, what you may call it, people are trying to join a movement where they all wear clothes and walk down the street and get arrested. And then later on, they found out that these people are a decent human being, very successful human being, but because of the prejudgment of the police brutality, now we can see in YouTube and Facebook videos showing that. But if you just think a little bit, these practices used to be here before the social media. And then the social media brought that to us so we can do something about it. Now we're talking about...
Do you have questions, because we have other people?
Yes, but I'm going straight to the question.
Yeah, please, we have very little time.
Yes,
that's why.
The question is for Mr. Ferguson, what's your take on the social media helping some practices to be addressed? That's the question.
Thank you. We have a gentleman over there. We take all the questions, then we give 2 minutes to each. Yes.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the informative session. I just want to address the mainstream media. As a Muslim who have been here for 37 years, third generation, I have grandchildren, and the way how the media is prosecuting Muslims by profiling them, I think it's a harm to national security, because we're excluding the Muslims from playing a big role. There are Muslims as doctors and many forms of life. And we have fourth and fifth generation if we do that. I'm asking all of you, how would you address this concern of us Muslims, especially today, Trump running for elections and bashing Muslims every day, and the media is promoting that. So as an American Muslim, who have been here for 37, I became a citizen in 1986. I have my daughter, she's 35 years old, with masters in linguistics. My son, married, has 3 grandchildren. What are you going to do for me? What is my rights as an American citizen that have been violated every single day? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so I'll start with the Right Honorable Congressman. If you want to say one or two things.
I think I want to make sure I get it right. You want to know what is the role of social media? I think social media has already played its role because it's connected people. And it's two things. One is connected people, as was mentioned both in the Middle East, also the individual now has been empowered to communicate. So you can communicate an idea to a lot of people, and you can be the initiator. So I think it has empowered people. It would be extreme to say your own civil rights leader, but if your thoughts are worthy, well thought out, well developed, you can share them with others. Others will join, whether it's a demonstration or other form of protest. So that would kind of be my response. And anyone else want to?
Yeah, Charles, do you want to say anything?
Sure. You know, I can kind of touch on both these subjects together, and it's not a quick, I mean, I'll make this a quick answer, but we could sit here all day, and I'm happy to follow up. I wish there was funding from somewhere in the Middle East or somewhere amongst some association, because there needs to be an education campaign, because there's so many misunderstandings about Islam, about the Muslim communities, about how people grow up and what governments are doing. I mean, the legislation this week on JASTA alone with 9/11 in Saudi Arabia fuels both sides' intentions. So, I think there needs to be a faces of Islam or the faces of the Muslim community that talks about the peacefulness of the communities, that talks about the types of education programs that and how much money you're giving to the U.S. I mean, there needs to be some sort of awareness campaign to counteract all of these stigmas and negative. Otherwise, the Bubbas in the United States are going to continue to act like this, and they're going to continue to push propaganda. Go ahead. Right.
You raise a very interesting point, and I'll give you my perspective, and it's not a solution or an answer, it's just my perspective. And that is, people have to be proactive. African Americans have to be proactive, Muslims have to be proactive. We have to message, we have to communicate our thoughts, our beliefs, our reality to other people. We have to use the media, press conferences, social media, whatever the case may be, to tell the story, to tell the narrative. The media has commercial interest in terms of mass media, ratings, advertising. Individuals, social media, they have their own perspective, their own biases. So I think it's incumbent upon individuals such as yourself and organizations to message. If you don't like what the mass media is saying, counter message. That's been the experience in the African American community.
David, you want to say something?
I mean, basically, that's what Martin Luther King did. You talk about being bashed, African Americans were bashed in this country. And Martin Luther King began to counter message, and the media began to cover his message. If you saw the movie Selma, that's what that was all about. It was counter messaging, the media had to cover it. That's why Lyndon Johnson had to respond, because he couldn't have those images on the screen of African Americans being beaten by police officers, because the mass media had to cover it.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really tough issue, but I agree with the congressman that in the United States, because of our great respect for freedom of expression, the approach that we take is not to censor hate speech, but to counter it with positive speech. And that is not a perfect solution, but it's the one that has proven, I think, to work best for American society. And this goes all the way back to, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said the best remedy for a bad idea is a good idea. Not to stamp out what we could all agree are not just unpleasant, but really disgusting, hateful, horrible speech. But you can't, if you stamp that out or you try to do that, then our view tends to be that that could slide over into censorship, even of reasonable differences. And so unless there's direct incitement to violence, the famous yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? That's not allowed. But anything short of that, for better or worse, is allowed by law and by the Constitution in the United States. And as tough as it is, I think in the long run that's the best answer is to put out positive messages, not to try and suppress negative messages. What we say is that freedom of speech means freedom of speech even for the speech that I hate. Otherwise, there is no freedom.
Thank you, gentlemen. This concludes our panel.
So I was honored to be part of the Moroccan American Forum today to discuss media. Media is a very important part of branding of a country, whether it's articulating their commitment to fighting terrorism, to attracting investment, and to taking care of their people. But it's also a forum in which a country can discuss their needs, their wants, and it's a forum that they can articulate their commitment to the United States and to democracy and human rights and things of that nature.
أثني على هذه المناظرة وهذه الندوة العالمية اللي حضروها يعني ممثلين الإعلام المغربي والأمريكي، وحضروا لها أيضا سياسيين أمريكيين وممثلين عن المنظمات الغير الحكومية وعن أجهزة يعني المنظمات ديال اللوبينغ اللي عطاونا واحد الفكرة على الدور ديال الإعلام ماشي دابا في المستقبل كي غادي يكون، والدور ديال السوشيال ميديا يعني مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي والديجيتال ميديا اللي غادي يكون عندها واحد أهمية كبيرة في الحياة ديال البشرية مستقبلا، وكيفاش حنايا كمغاربه خصنا نواكبوا هذا التطور من الان نفكروا فيه، وخاصه بلادنا وانتم كتعرفوا بانه في المغرب كاين واحد الحضور كبير ديال مواقع التواصل الاجتماعي وديال الديجيتال ميديا في الحياه ديال المواطنين، لان اصبحت عاديه مع كثره وتنامي ديال يعني الهواتف الذكيه اللي اصبحت كتقوم بواحد الدور مهم في التواصل سواء بين الاشخاص او لا في تواصل المعلومه عبر المدن وعبر الجمعيات وعبر المنظمات الى اخره.
Well, I think it's a great opportunity to focus on the role of the media and to focus on how we can work together, how U.S. Companies and Moroccan companies, the U.S. government, the Moroccan government can work together. I think we utilize the media as a vehicle to accomplish our goals: mutual understanding, exchange, trade, cooperation against terrorism. All those things can be facilitated, but this is how we begin that process.
إذا يمكن أبرز شيء في هذه الندوة هو حضور المرأة المغربية خلال يعني الدوائر المستديرة، وكذلك المواضيع اللي تناولتها هذه الندوة، هذا المنتدى الدولي للإعلام، بحيث هناك مقاربة بين الرهانات الانتخابية المغربية وكذلك الرهانات الانتخابية الأمريكية، وكذلك الميزة الأساسية هو دخول لاعب جديد في هذا المرمى في هذا الملعب ديال الانتخابات، وهو مواقع التواصل الاجتماعية والدور اللي كتلعب في بلورات يعني سياسات التواصل لأصحاب القرار. شكرا.